once you're hydrated, you need to connect with the fact that a defining feature of Trump 2.0 is the promise to decimate American communities by targeting immigrants for mass deportations. Now, this could amount to the expulsion of millions of people who are already contributing members of our society and who live here with their families. On election night, MSNBC's Paula Ramos joined mixed status families in Phoenix, Arizona, to monitor the outcomes and to listen to their fears and concerns. And here is what some of them had to say.
Es algo muy espantoso y me da mucha ansiedad pensar en lo que esto significará por la comunidad inmigrante, siendo hija de papás inmigrantes y indocumentadas. También me da mucha ansiedad.
Ahorita mismo no sé qué sentir. Creo que solo me da mucho miedo, como no solo por mi familia, pero todas las familias como en mi comunidad.
Now, having heard that, it must be said that Donald Trump made major gains with Latino voters, particularly Latino male voters, last night. And joining me now from Phoenix to unpack all of that is MSNBC contributor Paula Ramos. She is the author of Defectors, The Rise of the Latino Far Right and What It Means for America. The perfect person to talk to on this point. Paula, talk about the family that you were with. They talked about some of their fears. Say a little bit more about that and what they're expecting to happen starting next January.
Yeah, Joy, this is when it feels real, right? I spent the night with those families that we just saw, mixed status families that I have to say at the beginning of the night were holding on to some form of hope, believing that this country, maybe for a minute, would reject Donald Trump's vision for America. At the end of the night, though, they understood that this is a country that chose mass deportations, which has become the core of Trumpism, a country that chose to separate families like that. And so I think this is the moment when things start to feel real, Joy. These words, these visions, these things that Donald Trump has said, it's real now, not January 20th, because this is the moment when Renata and Regina, those two young girls that you saw, right now, as we're speaking, her parents are actively thinking about self-deporting to Mexico. Fidel, the young Latino man that you saw, his mom, who's undocumented, is completely overwhelmed with fear. Today, I spoke to immigrant families, a woman called Lupita, who's thinking about who is going to have custody of her child, of her daughter. And so I think what's important to stress here is that this isn't just another reality in a place like Arizona. There are over 22 million people in this country that live in mixed status families. We're talking about over 10 million U.S. citizens. And so what is happening is that we have pushed a new chapter in American history that may see a chapter where we will see mass deportations, mass family separations of American people.
And we've seen that a spokesperson for Donald Trump says the incoming administration will, in fact, begin the largest mass deportation effort in history. They said it was a promise that Donald Trump made to his constituents, and so they're going to do it. So this is not a theoretical thing at this point. So you have talked to people in Border Patrol who have said to you, oh, it won't be racial profiling, how it's going to be done. Walk us through what that would actually look like if a family like the one that you spoke with was subject to this.
Look, I think we don't know many things, but we do know what you just said. They will try. They will try no matter what. And I think what's important to realize, particularly given this idea that over 40% of Latinos voted for someone like him, we have to realize the following. If you're a black and brown person in this country right now, inevitably, we will all be part of the racial profiling that will inevitably ensue if these mass deportations unleash. We don't know who will be sort of deemed American enough in the eyes of Trump's America, right? This is a moment when Trump gets to look at us and decide who is American looking enough. History has already taught us something. You and I have talked about this, Joy. Operation Wetback taught us that they didn't just deport over 1 million Mexican immigrants. Part of those over 1 million people that were deported also included U.S. citizens. Why? Because it was an administration that literally targeted people that were Mexican looking. And so now we are staring at the real possibility, this real question that we've been talking to for many months at this point, which is who looks undocumented, who looks like an immigrant. And we don't know that the answer to that question, but we do know, to Rachel's point, that this is a time to organize, to resist, and to do what people in Arizona have done for a really long time, which is protect their immigrant communities. This is not new for them.
One of the things in terms of this mass deportation, and they were talking about up to 11 million people, Donald Trump just during the campaign has talked about expanding workplace raids to identify and apprehend undocumented immigrants, meaning small business owners could see their business places raided to see who is documented and who is not, invoking, and Donald Trump has said this himself, invoking the 1798 Alien Enemies Act to declare an invasion, and that was the law that was used to intern Japanese Americans during World War II. So we're talking about something for which there's already law on the books, and building new detention camps. I was in South Texas in Tornillo, and I saw that they know how to do this. Like, they've built detention camps before, so this is not theoretical. This happened when the child separation policies happened. And so given all of that, you wrote the book, and I am reading Defectors right now, and in many ways it's quite depressing to think that Latinos would be in favor of this, but some are, and you've spoken with some of them. A majority of Latino men voted for Donald Trump. In your view, did they vote for him thinking that somehow he didn't mean them? Because some of them likely live in mixed status families too.
Absolutely. Look, I think this is a story that has yet to be determined. We don't know many things, and that is the answer, right? We don't know the story of the Latino vote, but here's what we do know. We do know that Trump was able to tap into, to your point, very real racial and ethnic grievances. He was able to tap into a very real moral panic. He was able to tap into sort of this romanticized version that we have with authoritarianism. And I don't know that these are things, the sort of rightward shift. I do not know, Joy, if these are things that we can explain just through politics, right? Just through Trumpism. I think we may have to dig deeper to our culture, to our history, to sort of the weight of colonialism, understand the way that sort of this racial baggage that we carry from Latin America, perhaps that explains some of the anti-immigrant narratives that have suddenly become so embedded within us. Perhaps the sort of traditionalism, the weight that that has had on our moral values, perhaps that helps explain why this anti-trans message really resonated with Latino men. Perhaps our own very complicated history with authoritarianism, maybe that helps explain why some people do sort of find strongman rule appealing. And so I think what we do have to do is kind of take a step back and understand that we don't know a lot of these answers. We don't know what is happening. And it is okay to understand that we are not a monolith, right? That Latino voters today have sent a very, very, very different message, and we need to understand what that means.
Indeed. Paula Ramos, an excellent, exceptional journalist, and we know that you will be one of the people doing the groundwork of journalism that we're going to need in this moment. Paula, thank you very much. Much appreciated.